All right. Facebook claims that we are live. Welcome, Susan. Hello. We are about to kick it off. Everybody can see and hear us now, Susan. If you don't mind just turning off your camera for the moment, and we'll turn it back on once we get to your segment. Thank you very much. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We've got a whole bunch of people here with us on Zoom. We're also live streaming to Facebook. And if you're looking later on to watch this again, you'll be able to locate it on YouTube as well. Today, we are going to be talking about a really timely conversation here in Texas, Delta-8 THC. So first of all, my name is Jax Finkel. I'm the Executive Director for Texas NORML. And let's start off with what is Delta-8 THC? So there are several different types of THC, if you will, Delta-8, Delta-6, Delta-10, but the most traditionally and most commonly known one is Delta-9, and that's also the one that's specifically denoted in a lot of the statutes. Delta-8 naturally occurs in cannabis plants, but at super low rates. Therefore, the Delta-8 that you're consuming from retail establishments are not necessarily directly extracted from the plant. Rather, manufacturers use a process using high CBD hemp flowers and or CBD isolate to create Delta-8. Basically, they take this product and they put it through an isomerization process. Usually it's a sort of acidic bath. And this converts the CBD molecule to the Delta-8 molecule. Manufacturers then hopefully remove all of any of the residual solvents, and this leaves them with the Delta-8 product. At that point, it can be turned into a vape cartridge, it can be added to edibles, it can be dusted over hemp flowers. There are many different ways that you can then use that Delta-8 concentrate. Now, there's a lot of controversy in the cannabis community about Delta-8 and what it means to people and for people. There's also controversy over the legality of it. Recently here in Texas, we saw that the Texas Department of State Health Services updated the wording on its website to say that products containing more than 0.3% of Delta-8 would be marked as illegal Schedule I controlled substances. And so, to start our very lovely and filled out agenda tonight, we're actually going to talk about the Delta-8 lawsuit that's going on right now first. So there's an Austin-based distributor called Hometown Hero, and they filed a lawsuit against the Department of State Health Services, also known as DSHS, alleging that DSHS didn't follow the proper procedures and therefore kind of covertly modified the state schedule of controlled substances. So I want to turn it over first to Lukas Gilkey of Hometown Heroes, and then he's also going to be joined by Maguire of the Texas Hemp Federation. And for those of you that don't know, they are, Lukas is part of this lawsuit. So I'm going to invite you guys to start your video, and I'm going to turn mine off and take it away.
Thanks for having us, Jax. Much appreciated. Jay, you're on mute, brother.
Jax, thanks. Really appreciate you having us tonight. Lukas Gilkey and I founded the Texas Hemp Federation back right before COVID began in anticipation of a set of public policy and legal issues that probably were going to arise as a result of the legalization of hemp in Texas. And I think everybody here knows about how the federal farm bill in 2018 was followed by the 2019 Texas hemp bill that descheduled hemp. And Lukas's company is a major manufacturer in our state here in the Austin area. Lukas is the board president of the Texas Hemp Federation. We work very closely together. During the legislative session this year, in 2021, we had revisions to that initial hemp legalization bill, we referred to as the hemp fix bill. It was primarily aimed at making some technical changes, the number of days a plant needed to be in the ground, for example, that farmers really needed to have updated. Unfortunately, the prohibitionist chairman of the Senate committee Charles Perry from Lubbock, who chairs the Water, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs Committee, took that opportunity to initially ban all cannabinoids, including CBD, was one of the amendments that he floated, and settled very late in the 11th hour of the session on banning Delta-8. I testified in front of that committee, as did lots of other, lots of business owners in the area, because Delta-8 has emerged as the primary the primary money-making product of the Texas hemp industry to date. What I know about Delta-8 is that it is essentially harmless. Jax, you're absolutely right that it is an isomer of CBD. Recall that there was before the emergence of Delta-8 on the market, a glut of CBD on the market, which caused prices to plummet. Prices of CBD, also prices of biomass. Delta-8 has similar properties as Delta-9 THC derived from marijuana, which is illegal except for by prescription under our compassionate use program in Texas. Delta-8 is derived from hemp. Our contention in our lawsuit is that Delta-8 is and should be completely legal as a hemp-derived substance. It is only a synthetic in the sense that it is put through the isomerization process. It is not a synthetic in the sense that prohibitionists like Senator Perry would like you to think. They're comparing wrongly Delta-8 to such marijuana substitutes as K2 and spice, which many of us might remember about a decade ago or less than a decade ago, were freely available on the market and were causing all kinds of havoc because they were truly synthetic substances. Nobody really knew what was in them. So our contention is that we are good actors. Our products should be regulated. Lukas's products and all the products made by members of the Texas Hemp Federation are subjected to rigorous lab testing beyond what's required by law. But you can find a QR code on all of his products, for example, that leads you right to that lab report. Lukas can talk a little bit more about the rigorous testing that goes on, but essentially our opposition outside of the industry is relying on the same tired reefer madness arguments that they've been using for a century. It is nothing less than the latest iteration of the culture war that has given us such things as mass incarceration, the war on drugs, has led law enforcement to view any cannabis as either suspicious or an illegal, nefarious substance. We have to stand up against that. So for the audience tonight, those of you who are in the legal cannabis industry in Texas, I would encourage you to not give in to the temptation to look at us as a threat to your existing businesses or as somehow bad for the legalization effort. Quite the contrary. We're out there proving the point every single day that for the last century, the American public and Texans have been lied to about the nature of cannabis itself. Far from what they would have you believe, ordinary citizens, business owners, professionals, blue collar working class people, and veterans are getting relief from pain, anxiety, inflammation, and other conditions. They don't have to get a prescription for it. We are upending those notions right on their head. And to be honest with you, I think this was an entirely political move on the part of DSHS. Dishes, as it's called, did this in the dark of night, circumvented the Administrative Procedures Act. This is all laid out in the pleadings of our lawsuit, which Andrea Steele or Lukas might be able to tell you about later. Circumvented the Administrative Procedures Act, failed its mandatory ministerial duty to provide explicit public notice about what they intended to do and to take public testimony on what they were going to do. They failed to do that. Their public notice referred only to objecting to the DEA's descheduling of hemp-derived cannabinoids. And then in a 6 or 7 minute Zoom call attended by no one besides staff and commission members, put us on to the controlled substances list. I don't think I have to explain how offensive that is to the millions of people who are relying on these products for pain relief and anxiety relief and inflammation relief, or how offensive it is to business owners who have every right to participate in the government processes guaranteed to us by the laws and constitution of this state. Dishes was dirty here. Make no mistake. They were doing this under political orders from somebody, probably in the Senate, when the Senate failed to pass the bill that I mentioned earlier. So that's right. In the last legislative session, the House chairman refused to go along with Senator Perry's prohibition, and Representative Tracy King pulled down the bill. The legislature did not act on this. And so, we think that the court is going to agree with us that DSHS had a mandatory ministerial duty and obligation to follow the law, which you can loosely, conceive of as the open government laws of this state. They certainly violated the spirit of those laws, and we think the letter as well. It is an outrage. No government entity should be allowed to regulate like this. We intend to prove that in court. Anybody who is concerned about good manufacturing practices or marketing practices, yes, absolutely. We agree that our industry needs to be regulated, and we will embrace good manufacturing practices and good marketing practices. We will not market to children. We will not market to people under 21. We will not use child attractive packaging. Members of our federation won't anyway. And we would support enacting that into law. But don't let those things distract you from what's actually going on here, which is a frontal assault on all cannabis. So that's all I've got to say. I'm going to turn this over to Lukas, and more than happy to take any questions in the chat.
Jay, I love speaking with you because you get to say all the things I want to say, but I'm not allowed to. Yeah, this has been really fascinating. So, we've been selling Delta-8 across the country, obviously, and Texas decided out of the blue that they wanted to make everyone involved felons. And overnight, DSHS basically determined that there was going to be tens of thousands of Texans. We're talking store employees, store owners, consumers, you name it. I mean, literally tens of thousands of people that overnight are now felons in Texas based on what DSHS said. So it's really fascinating to kind of see how this is evolving. Now, to be clear, there's a lot of misinformation on the case, and Andrea will talk to that, and Jay's already spoken about it, but the case is very procedural. The case is not about necessarily the legality of Delta-8 right now. In the future, this may come to fruition, but right now the case is really about the procedures that were taken by DSHS, wrongfully so, not following their own rules to create essentially a law. And we beat, a group of politicians along with DSHS in the legislative session. They tried to, in multiple bills, make Delta-8 illegal. They failed. And so they tried to do it outside of session through DSHS in a way that nobody knew about, that was very sneaky, very deceitful. And sort of, now here we are. We're in a lawsuit about it. So it's a very fascinating sort of spin on sort of the traditional, prohibitionist stance on cannabis. They are coming at us from a different way now. This is more of a procedural tactic rather than just a flat outright ban on Delta-8. So it is interesting. And Delta-8's obviously new cannabinoid. There's more cannabinoids coming every day. It seems like every week now in the industry, I'm hearing about a new cannabinoid that I'd never heard of before. And I think this is going to continue for quite some time. As far as I know, there's probably over 100 cannabinoids at this point that we just don't know about. So it's really fascinating. It's a great time in the industry. The hemp industry is really coming out with some very innovative things around cannabis. I'm honored to be a part of what the hemp industry is doing. And I think for a long time, when people thought of the hemp industry, they thought of like, backpacks and fanny packs made out of hemp. That is no longer the case. The hemp industry is growing massively and providing products that actually have a medicinal benefit to many people. A lot of them veterans, a lot of them cancer patients, people with traumatic injuries, all these different things that people are looking for some kind of relief for, and they're finding it in hemp-derived cannabinoids, which is amazing. And I'm honored to be a part of that.
You made me think that actually there was a VFW that had machine in there for the veterans that had a different array of products there, and they had to unplug it and put it back until
those are our products in the VFWs, by the way.
Okay, well there.
And Jack
there
said,
you go.
let me point out that the National Legislative Director for the Veterans of Foreign Wars will be called as a witness in our hearing on Friday.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so that's
Good.
what I was going to ask. So the next step is there is a hearing on the 5th. I was watching the previous one, and I did, your point was well taken, Lukas, that it's a procedural thing. Your lawyer said, it's like, let's go back and let everybody have comment. We've got 800 people watching this stream right now. You think really that there would have been no comments at this?
Yeah. And there were actually more than 800 because they changed the link at the last minute, I heard. And I think there was 400 that were watching the live stream that didn't happen, I guess. And there was 800 another one. So in all actuality, there should have been over 1,000 people watching it. And DSHS held a session and nobody showed up. Come on.
Yeah, especially because other stuff was going on and I was tracking it. So I know whenever I was like, I'm sorry, when was that?
let me point out that DSHS had to do this surreptitiously, because if they had done it the right way, we would have brought expert witnesses, organic chemists, everybody ranging from medical doctors to scientists at the PhD level, and they would have had to refute the science that we were prepared to present. DSHS is obligated to consider scientific facts. They did not do that here. So that's a little bit separate from the procedural arguments that we're making in court. But the substantive argument here is that they will not be able, I'm sure to date, will not be able to refute any of the evidence that we're bringing that cannabinoids like Delta-8 are fundamentally harmless when taken in appropriate dosage levels, that we should be regulated, and that they are actually beneficial for people who take them.
Well, I think we all know that THC is a compound that there is a market for, that people want. And if you are going to have a restricted market instead of a regulated adult use cannabis market, then you're going to have issues like this where people are, the market is supplying the demand in ways that they weren't expecting. So I think that doubling down on prohibition may not be the best way to go with that. I think definitely continued testing, ensuring that there's good labeling, making sure that it's for people of the age 21 and up is extremely important. So I want to thank you guys for joining us. I really appreciate the insight, and we are going to next be joined by the lovely Susan Hayes. She's been a long-time lawyer working on cannabis law reform. She also was working up at the legislature. So I wanted to turn it over to you, Susan. Take it away.
I will, and I'm subbing in for Chelsea, who had something come up, so I made her give me her notes. I'm going to run through her outline of sort of the timing on this and what happened that none of us really knew about, and then talk a little bit about the practicalities and what do we do now, and try not to horn in on what Andrea is going to talk about too much. So in August 2020, the DEA puts out its interim final rule. The legislature has expressly delegated to DSHS the ability to decide what Texas thinks about that. So as Jay mentioned, they decided they would publish in September 2020 a notice that nobody sees. And I don't want to say this about Texas politics in general. The agencies, the government has become so much less transparent over the last 20 years than what I even remember in the days before the internet. I subscribed to the Texas Register's email and to DSH's email, and it comes out in such a way that it would take an hour of legal work to understand what the hell the email says, which nobody, including lawyers, has to give day to day. It's purposely really opaque. So they put out their notice. They have their hearing that nobody knows about in October 2020. The final notice is published in the Texas Register in January 2021, which no human being can read cover to cover every week. And then in May, they show up at a hearing and mention it and testify that we already think Delta-8 is illegal. And then I want to kind of shift there and talk about a little bit about what we mean when we say, is it legal or is it not? The world is never that black and white. And the law is, there's a Shakespeare line about the law is an ass, or I may be misattributing that. It really is. It's just not that simple. I began the legislative session convinced Delta-8 was legal. I ended it believing it's a 50-50 argument. And my background as an attorney is I'm board certified in civil appellate law. So what I came up and was trained to do is be able to argue either side and be able to weigh how good I think both those arguments are. And it's a 50-50 deal. You can look at the definition of hemp or the Controlled Substance Act's definition of controlled substance excludes hemp, except it has the prepositional phrase cannabinoids in hemp. And if you read that, really focus in on that N word, Delta-8 may be in trouble. You also can look at the paragraph that's in penalty group 2 that describes tetrahydrocannabinols. It's really broad. It's meant to mean any THCs that aren't in a plant matter. And what I know about the courts now that maybe that's going to be a hard hurdle is the Texas Supreme Court's one of the most conservative courts around. They like to read words hyper literally. And they also aren't exactly the most intellectually honest court I've ever seen. You know, I was a law clerk there in the late 90s. It's great. You know, my joke is I've shifted my career from appellate law to lobbying because it's a more honest profession these days compared to the shenanigans that are going on in our courts. And then and I'll also say this, legislators can get mad at something and pass a law and say it's illegal, or bureaucrats can do the same through rulemaking at times. But that doesn't mean it's going to get enforced. And we're in a state politically in Texas where the big urban areas have lost all political will to enforce low-level marijuana possession. So what do you think is going to happen with Delta-8? Our big urban district attorneys have bigger fish to fry. So what does that mean practically? And for those of you who are out there trying to do business, it means if you're going to do business in this gray area, you better have a budget, a savings account, if you will, for what happens if you're the lucky winner who gets to be the test case and gets busted. You got to weigh your risk. Are you in a big urban county where your DA's got bigger fish to fry? Or are you in a smaller county where your DA may want to be a hero, depending on their politics? So knowing your local politics and knowing your state politics is really, really important. And paying attention not just to our statewide elections, and that for cannabis policy overall is our big issue, is we have a lieutenant governor who's incredibly hostile to cannabis, a governor who's warming ever so slightly, but still doesn't understand it, and a lot of Senate leadership who are fairly hostile, but are coming around, certainly on the medical cannabis side. But what's also important are your local cops and your local district attorney. Get a sense of their politics. No, I was on a similar webinar on this a few weeks ago, and there was a business owner from El Paso who happens to be 2 doors down from the DEA office, and she has been in dialogue with them since she opened her doors. So the last person who's going to be a test case is the nice lady who talks to the DEA agents. It can be worth your while to do that. And I also want to reiterate a couple of, this crisis may also be an opportunity. How do we turn this hot mess around Delta-8 to our favor? How I try to do it when I talk to people like Senator Perry or people who are hostile to cannabis is say, look, you guys got behind the market. What do you think was going to happen? If we don't have a healthy regulatory regime around cannabis, things are going to happen you don't like. And you need a way to sort out the good actors, the people who are members of Jay's organization who follow good business practices, follow good manufacturing practices, follow good retail practices like not selling to kids, from the bad actors. And in any fast-growing industry, there's going to be bad actors. And those bad actors can ruin the party for everybody if we don't, as an industry, come together to try to root them out. And I may have talked way too fast for your schedule, Jax, but that's sort of the ground I wanted to cover in my time.
Awesome. Thank you. That'll just give us a little bit more time for Q&A. I'm making some notes of some comments here in Facebook so we can make sure to get those. I see a Q&A here mentioned as well. So y'all keep putting that in there and we'll get to that in just a second. So next we will be welcoming Andrea Steele. She has been a longtime cannabis lawyer as well. If you notice, I dropped in the chat a link to our Delta-8 blog, and one of the posts that she's put together about it is there. So I want to turn it over to Andrea because, you know, businesses everywhere are like, what is going on? Because Delta-8, whether you like it as a compound or not, is something that a lot of people are actively selling and making income on. And so it is an important conversation. So thank you for joining us, Andrea. Take it away.
Thanks for having me. And I really appreciate the speakers that came before me. Of course, I talk to Jay and Lukas pretty frequently, but it's been a while since I talked to Susan. So good to see and hear her. I have to say, I think everybody so far, there's a lot that I agree with what's been said. I do want to mention a couple of things just to make some points of clarification, which in this industry, it's so highly nuanced that it's just really technical. And so it's kind of tough to sort it out without attorneys, and even sometimes attorneys don't agree. So one of the things though was that, and Jax, I heard you mention this, that the website says no THCs other than up to 0.3%, or no more than 0.3% Delta-8. That's actually not what they're saying. The DSHS website is saying that there are no THCs except for up to 0.3% Delta-9, and everything else is illegal, which in and of itself is problematic simply for the fact that Delta-8 naturally occurs in the plant, is going to be present to some extent in full spectrum extracts. And so this change that they said they didn't make, but that they made, pretty much makes the hemp plant illegal. And so it's just, had there been an effective and sufficient public process, this language, if people would have known about it, would have been discussed, and DSHS would have known that this language was problematic. But because that didn't happen, now they've changed effectively what can be treated as the law, and we're in a really perilous environment right now. So then the other thing, one of the things that Susan mentioned was that when the DEA IFR dropped last August, that gave DSHS the opportunity to object. And that's one of the primary issues with the lawsuit being brought against DSHS, is that the DEA interim final rule was not a change in the law. In order for DSHS to object to changes to the federal schedules, the federal schedule has to have a substance either added to it, deleted from it, or rescheduled. And all the DEA interim final rule did was bring into alignment what the 2018 Farm Bill had already done and what was already in effect. So under the 2018 Farm Bill, we got a definition for hemp that was pretty broad, and it essentially it set the groundwork for an entire market to be created from this product, from this crop into all these products, so long as the Delta-9 levels don't exceed 0.3%. Other than that, it's fair game. All extracts, isomers, cannabinoids, all of them are included and encompassed in the definition of hemp itself. So it's not just the plant, but it's also everything that comes from the plant, so long as you don't exceed that Delta-9 threshold. So the market took off. And what so we got a definition out of the 2018 Farm Bill, and what the 2018 Farm Bill also did was carve out hemp from the definition of marijuana in the Federal Controlled Substance Act, as well as carve out hemp from THCs. So THCs and hemp are not controlled substances. Hemp is not marijuana, and that's the Federal Controlled Substance Act. Texas followed suit, and House Bill 1325 made those same changes. In fact, House Bill 1325 took it even further and said that hemp and THCs and hemp are not controlled substances in any way, shape, or form. They are removed from the definition of controlled substance. So what the DEA interim final rule did was go ahead and bring the schedule of controlled substances into alignment with what the 2018 Farm Bill did. So they updated the definition of THC in the schedules, because they had one in the Controlled Substance Act and one in the schedules. So they modified the definition of schedules to be aligned with the 2018 Farm Bill law, and they modified the definition of marijuana extract so that it also carved out hemp. This was already the law. It's just that the schedules didn't say it because the DEA hadn't caught up to it. Congress makes the law, the agencies make the rules that kind of flesh out the details of the law. Same in Texas. The legislature makes the laws, and the state agencies flesh out the details in the rulemaking process. But the state agencies don't have the right to make law on their own, and they don't have the right to create laws or to create rules that contradict the laws that the legislature has passed. So the basis for objection didn't exist in the first place because there was nothing to object to. So with that, everything that took place after that was improper anyway. But even if it was, like Jay mentioned earlier, nobody showed up. There were and anybody in the hemp industry in Texas knows, every meeting, every informal and formal rulemaking process, whether it was on the TDA side for cultivation, or was on the DSHS side for consumable, hundreds of people showed up. Thousands of comments got submitted. So it's kind of obvious that if nobody showed up, not one person, nobody knew. And so that issue, as far as proper notice in and of itself, I mean, the lawsuit is pretty clear, and some amended pleadings were filed today, and they'll be available soon for everybody to see. But the story is there. It's just it is what it is, and they're facts. So, anyways, we get through that, and this process happened. And one thing that hadn't been mentioned or hadn't been pointed out was, they had this notice of objection in October. He said they were objecting to the DEA's changes. They had this hearing nobody knew about and showed up to, said they were objecting to the changes. They published this final decision saying that they objected to the changes. And then months later, they actually did change the schedule of controlled substances in a significant way by flipping the definition of hemp on its head. And instead of having, all derivatives and extracts and isomers up to 0.3% be legal, it was now none except for up to 0.3% Delta-9. Completely reversed it. So the changes were significant. And then when they were published in the form of a picture. And every year DSHS is required to publish the schedule of controlled substances. They also publish all throughout the year, every time they make modifications to it. This annual schedule that they finally published in March was the first time anybody ever had an opportunity to see the actual language changes that were made to the definitions of marijuana extract and the changes that were made to the definition of THC. But you can't find it because it's an image with non-searchable text. So I look for these things. Just like Jack said, you said you follow it. I follow it too. I look for these things. I was looking for this and I never found it because you can't search the keywords to find it. If you go back and you look at the history of the annual schedules and every year that they're published, always published in full text. Never before has it been published in the form of an image, especially not one that you can't search. So it's just really unusual, to say the least. And, there's a lawsuit. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens on Friday in the hearing. I agree with Susan that, this depends, and it has depended on law enforcement. And a lot of times local law enforcement ignores the law anyway. People end up getting arrested. It's up to DA whether or not charges are going to be brought. And, people are getting arrested, or were getting arrested for hemp flower when that first happened. So we've got the law enforcement issue really comes down to education, and it's all across the state. And so we know the larger cities in the state and counties in the state kind of backed off of cannabis, but the kind of podunk towns maybe don't have much better to do. So anyhow, that's all I've got for now. I'm happy to answer questions.
Awesome. I see Susan has her hand up, so I feel like she wants to add a little something to the conversation.
That and hate on dishes some more. And I realized why I went so fast because I left out some things I wanted to say. And one was, and to riff off what Andrea was saying about enforcement, dishes did what they did, but they don't have any enforcement strength. And they haven't, to my knowledge, has anybody heard of dishes enforcing against any licensee? And let's also talk about their failure to communicate. If they thought Delta-8 was so awful and so bad, why didn't they email all the registrants of retail spaces for consumable hemp products and the manufacturers? They've got your email addresses. It's not hard. but they chose to sort of hide their light under a bushel and surprise everybody. I mean, even if there ultimately doesn't turn out to be a strong legal argument against the procedure they followed, from a governing point of view and an ethical point of view, it's just awful what they've done to the industry and people who've invested in Delta-8, like Lukas and his
Well,
business.
and even if it's not getting enforced against licensees, if people are getting pulled over in these podunk little towns, they are getting arrested.
It's
so
like,
it is an
it's a
impact
big
for
game
the
of,
customer.
some variation of Russian roulette. You don't know who's got the bullet in their chamber.
Yeah.
And I would also want to love on the people out there who paid attention to this during session and did their online testimony. When I went and looked at the online testimony on Delta-8 and the House committee hearing, it was almost all about medical use. And that was great for me as a lobbyist to go back into Perry's office and throw it up at him, which I didn't quite say that right. Perhaps I said that. I did say that right. That, look, this is pent up demand for medical cannabis. And this is what happens when you have a regulatory regime that doesn't match the reality of the marketplace.
Yeah, agreed. Well, listen, I know we go on a tangent here all day, I know, but I want to make sure that we get to our last presenter before we open it up for Q&A. So I want to invite Christine Stenquist. She's the president of TRUCE, Together for Responsible Use and Cannabis Education, and she's going to be talking about federal law and Utah's issue. You know, Christine is the mother of 4, a brain tumor and chronic pain patient. She's been an advocate, and she helped with the legalization of medical cannabis in Utah. So Utah regulates Delta-8 in conjunction with Delta-9, and I'm really interested to learn a little bit more. So take it away, Christine.
Hi, thanks for inviting me to your discussion. We have a little bit of a mess in our state, to be quite honest. And I know that Texas is fighting for safe access, and Delta-9 and Delta-8 have caused us some problems. Currently, we have Delta-8 in our medical program, and that was to get it out of the smoke shops and out of the gas stations and other spaces where people were accessing it. And so our legislation was passed in October of 2019 to ban Delta-8 from our for being accessible in our state. But for whatever reason, somebody in the regulatory office, and that would be our health department, decided to let the industry allow this into our program. The problem I'm having is I'm in a patient advocacy group, and I have been getting reports and complaints from patients about the products that they are getting. They're getting sick off of these products. And I don't know anything about what your guys' meeting was about for what's going on in Texas. I can only talk about what's happening here in Utah for patients, and not just here, but across the country. We want to talk about the federal law, and I think it's important to understand that Delta-8 is still federally illegal. And I know everybody would like to fight back on that, but in 1986 was the analog bill that was passed. And that makes, and it states clearly that any chemicals that are in the Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 that are substantially similar are illegal. And so it's not just that law that we have on the federal level that makes it illegal, but we also still have it as a Schedule 1 substance. It is a 7370, page 10, line 7, clearly states that Delta-8 is illegal. So I know there's a lot of controversy as to what's going on for you guys in that state and whether you want to make Delta-8 illegal or not. I don't know what happened in this big meeting, but it sounds like you guys got really screwed over. Doesn't sound like representation was there. But I have a neuroscientist that sits on my board. I have a pain physician that sits on my board. We are patient advocates, and we work with the medical community. What I see is the hemp industry taking advantage of a situation. I see desperate patients needing access. And I think Susan hit the nail right on the head. Texas has waited far too long for adequate access. And this is what you see, desperation. You see industry trying to meet the demand. That's what I see. And what I see is the cart being put before the horse, because guess what, guys? As much as these hemp companies want to tell you that their product is clean and pure and they have the corner market on it, I can bring you a dozen neuroscientists that tell you it is not. And so I caution everyone to come to the table, figure out the best path forward for Texans, because you know what? They will find another analog to make illegal. Because guess what? THCO is coming and HHC is coming. All of these little analogs are coming, and what you're seeing is a product of prohibition. That's what you're seeing. And patients, they're getting sick. They are getting sick off of this process because we have not standardized it yet. Please, I'm begging you guys on behalf of patients and the neuroscientists that I work with and the pain physicians that I work with, do this right. Come to the table, talk with each other about what's actually happening, because on the federal level, you are not covered. I know you have attorneys and they're all telling you all these things, but this is a muddled mess and patients are getting hurt in the process. I would work on getting an actual program in Texas, because this is not the answer. This is putting patients in jeopardy. The FDA and the CDC came out with a warning because those are legitimate concerns. We don't know what those isomers are doing in a patient's liver when it's being mixed with other pharmaceutical drugs. You cannot, as the hemp industry, walk out into this community and act like you are the new small pharma. That's not appropriate and it's not acceptable. So while I have been invited to be a guest, I am not a supporter of this Delta-8 fiasco that we have coming in line across the country. It's not just Texas. It's not just Utah. Every state is dealing with this. Everybody wants to put California and Colorado on the map, saying we don't want to be like them. They banned this stuff, guys. They knew better. Plant medicine and the people who are searching for plant medicine, they don't want synthesized product. There's not one patient out here who's saying, I can't wait for the hemp industry to develop a multitude of synthesized products. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's what I've advocated for in Utah, and that's what I continue to tell patients across this country. Whole plant access is ideal. Chasing after distillates and trying to find the magic cannabinoid, there's 140 of them. The hemp industry is going to take you on a ride. They're going to come up with a new fad every other month. This cannabinoid, this cannabinoid. That's not how this plant works, and we know that. That's all I really have to say. I hope Texas gets what they deserve.
Well, I think that the point is very well taken that prohibition doesn't work and doubling down on it doesn't work. You know, patients would like to have access. Oh, excuse me, I'm getting wild with my laptop. Would like to have access to medical grade cannabis. And overarchingly, if we're allowed to have access to all of these other products that we put in our bodies as adults, wouldn't it be nice to be able to make sure that we have safe access to those as well? So I think research in conjunction with education is going to be very important moving forward, and also realizing that continuing to try to prohibit a plant is really just failed policy. So I want to invite everybody, if you would like to go ahead and turn on your cameras. It'll be all of us in gallery view. We can do some Q&A. And, you know, Christine mentioned the THCO and the HHC. And, you know, we talked about, you know, there's Delta-6 and this, that, and the other. And I mean, tons of people in the comments are asking, you know, like, what's the deal with that? How are they extracted? And is it legal for me to carry them in my store? Let me see. I'm sorry, Andrea, I think you're having trouble with your video. Is that working? And maybe Susan too. Let me see if I can. There we go. There you go. Okay, sorry about that. Oh, I know, Andrea, and you also wanted to talk about the DEA. So let's first talk about the DEA, and then we can pivot to talking to about some of these other cannabinoids. And I'll look through more questions.
So thanks. So Christine, I think there was one thing that she said that I may have agreed with, but I can't remember it now. But she mentioned that the DEA that this is federally illegal. And she and many other people may not be aware, but there's a few things about that. So let's see, the guidebook, right? The orange book, which is not, it's just a guidebook. It's not the law, but let's talk about it. Delta-8, yes, it is listed in there as another name for THC. It's been listed in there for decades. Nothing changed, but when the 28th bill was passed, that changed things. And just like Delta-9 is still listed in there, we know that THCs and hemp are no longer scheduled. The DEA has said that. In fact, that's exactly what they say in the interim final rule that they published. Cannabinoids and hemp that are under 0.3% Delta-9 THC are no longer scheduled. They said it there. It was pretty clear. A lot of people didn't want to, didn't think that was the truth. But that's what they said. And then, recently we've seen a YouTube video out that was a town hall, because there are states that allow Delta-8 and regulate it in their hemp market, Louisiana and Florida, that explicitly allow it. And there are many other states that are kind of silent on it, and it's taking place and it's happening in the market. But there was a Florida town hall a few months ago where the chief of interagency affairs got up and he spoke specifically to the question about Delta-8. And he said, I'm going to read the quote. He said specifically in response to Delta-8, he said, at this time, and I repeat again, at this time, per the Farm Bill, the only thing that is a controlled substance is Delta-9 greater than 0.3% based on a dry weight basis. The DEA unequivocally understands they have no authority over hemp whatsoever. I wrote an article about this when the interim final rule was published, because that's what it says. And this recent video confirms it. And there's some other information that has come out from the DEA that further confirms it. So while it may seem ludicrous to some that the DEA would deschedule other THCs, it wasn't the DEA that did it, it was Congress. And the DEA had to follow suit because the DEA has to follow the law. So there's that aspect. And then there's other typically plant-based substances that have psychoactive effects that also are not scheduled. Salvia, kava, Jimson weed, like kratom. This is not the only time that this has happened in history where the DEA does not take notice over substances that have psychoactive effects. So it's actually not that ludicrous. And that's all I have to say about that for now.
What about the CDC or the FDA? Do they have any oversight over THCs? Can anybody speak to that?
I do want to say something about the FDA and the CDC warnings that were published. So they were warnings. They talked about manufacturing practices. They talked about a lot of things, really people getting high unknowingly. I think, and a lot of that happened in people that were kids, right? And so they did not say these substances were illegal. In fact, they pointed out recommendations for healthcare workers, consumers, and retailers of what they should be doing when dealing with these products. So I think if it was illegal, they would say it was illegal. But
and that is a concern that there were, I know, some people under the age of 21 are getting it and becoming intoxicated. And, for context, in Texas, you have to be 21 to consume alcohol or to buy tobacco products now. So that's fairly standard here. And I know that was one thing that was discussed was, should there be an age requirement where an ID is required if these products are still going to be available? Or
and I don't want to be misunderstood, and I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying, oh, Delta-8 is like a free for all. Like, I absolutely think that any kind of substance of that nature should be regulated. And the FDA and the CDC warnings have some information in there that people should take heed to. So, don't get me wrong, but I kind of get a little ruffled when I hear blanket statements that are just not quite accurate.
Well, I've heard a lot of opinions on both sides on the DEA position, and is it federally legal or state legal? And I know that, a lot of people hold different positions and points of view on that, so I want to make sure everybody can speak to that. And also, you know, I know a lot of people have a lot of different feelings about Delta-8, feeling like, is it really straight from the plant? Some people, as Christine mentioned, they want a direct plant derivative, whereas some people are maybe okay with a little bit more manufacturing in there.
But if we are doing a manufacturing thing, that's a whole different industry. I mean, that is small pharma. That you are synthesizing and creating cannabinoids that aren't naturally occurring in a quantitative manner that would be helpful for patients. You are really creating a whole different industry. And that's what's going on. You have an overproduction of biomass across the country, and you see the hemp industry is trying to save themselves when they should be spending more time, honestly, investing into plastics and paper and the industrial hemp side. We're overrun with CBD in this country. I mean, this is the hemp industry bottom falling out. This is what they're doing to save themselves. This, well, and they want patients to be okay with this. And I don't see a physician or a doctor or a neuroscientist on your panel who is defending patients. I see attorneys, and I see hemp industry. I don't see people actually fighting for patients, and that's problematic for me.
In the Delta-8 industry, do you make money in the Delta-8 industry?
I do not, actually.
You don't make a penny from anything in the Delta-8 industry?
I don't.
I believe that she just works in education and policy as a patient advocate in Utah, is my understanding correct, Christine?
For a decade.
So, I mean, I think,
yeah.
You know, here we're having
You can be upset that I'm calling out a spade as a spade, because what this is about making money. It is so dirt cheap to make Delta-8. And you know what I'm holding in my hand? Products on our shelves that cost $125.
That's because it's
50 cents to make this stuff, and they are taking patients for a ride here in Utah. That's what's happening. So if you want to know what our experience is as patients in Utah with a legal program, that's what we're experiencing here.
I know
I don't know what you guys are doing
products here in Texas through our medical program as well, unfortunately, because it's a very small program, it's very limited. So I do understand that there's, you know, very different opinions and points of view here, but I think that it's an important conversation to have. And I think that when we're talking about patient needs, that can be separate from general consumption, but it is something that should still be considered. And I think it's also important that Delta-8 be researched. I mean, not that prohibition should be in place and people should be going to jail for it, but that we should understand how it works better. And I think that's a very important thing to do. But there was
maybe find us a middle ground here. That is what solves a lot of the issues we're all bringing up, is an industry where people can act legally and is regulated, where where product is third-party lab tested and labeled, so you know customers and patients know what they're getting.
Agreed. And
that the bad actors are, if you'll excuse the expression, weeded out and punished, and good actors are held up. You know, I'm one of the counsel in the smokable hemp ban case, and in that case, and I will say we got a much crappier opponent lawyer from the AG. Y'all had a really good one in the T8 case. And I did look up during the hearing, she's paid 70% of what the guy in the smokable hemp case is paid to do her job. But, you know, at one point we were called drug dealers in the court hearing, which was bad advocacy. I mean, it did not ingratiate the state to the judge hearing the case. But we've got to, you know, as a group and as a community, continue to advocate for reasonable regulations and also an end to prohibition.
It's just really hard whenever the legislators, you're dragging them kicking and screaming, and then this is the mess that you end up with, and patients are underserved and businesses are looking to fill the gap. And unfortunately, as Susan mentioned, there are bad actors that give bad names.
We have quite a few of them here. I know people are saying I'm bitter about the hemp industry. The actors I've had to deal with here have not been good players. And if you in Texas have wonderful players, God bless it. I'm so grateful that you guys do. But I have hemp company names, Barely Legal. I have Trojan. What these guys are doing here are trying to be deceitful. If you have players in your state that are being good actors, I'm I'm glad that's happening. I have come across some good players here in the hemp space. They make quality CBD. They're calling out the bad actors that we've got going on. It's not just me. So I need others to understand this is me attacking some really bad players that we've got in our state. So it's not an across the board, and I apologize if it made it sound like across the board, but we've had so much of it here, and it's so muddled with what is legal, and we have so many desperate patients.
And it's frustrating.
Or that's what you're hearing from me is frustration. It's not.
And that I will agree with you on,
loathing.
Christine. There's bad actors. Somebody just said in the comments, there's bad actors in the industry. There are.
Exactly.
There are. And look, I sincerely appreciate what you're saying. We do full panel testing. We test for pesticides, heavy metals, every possible thing that we can test for. We test for. We spend $20,000 a month on testing,
and make sure that the patients can.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Make sure that patients get those COAs, because we have no COA access in our state. Our labels are awful.
Oh, that's crazy.
Nobody knows if these are hemp derived or not hemp derived.
This might be a case where Texas has better regulation than other states then, because actually our consumables are overseen.
I mean, this is a labeling. We've got a serious labeling issue in Utah. Big time. You can't tell the difference between what is a marijuana plant or a hemp derived plant. Labelings on here are not clear. And we need something better. So you are hearing the frustration of a patient advocate who's been in this space for 10 years. And this is the stuff that I'm seeing, and I'm overwhelmed with it.
The Texas labeling program is actually phenomenal. It's fairly simple, but you are required to have a COA linked on the label. We use simple QR codes.
Well, we have that requirement here. It's what I'm telling you is it doesn't always happen. Best intentions are out there, but we don't have every company complying. So it is. I don't know who that falls onto for you guys, but we are really in a mess for us.
One of the things that all of us are saying is that this is a result of prohibition. And one of the things that you just mentioned was, who does it fall on? Just like we're having an issue at the federal level with consumable hemp products because the FDA doesn't have the manpower to enforce. I can tell you in Texas, DSHS doesn't have the manpower to enforce, and I don't know what's happening in every other state. But so that is an issue, and it's an issue, not a Delta-8 issue. It's an issue, period.
Yeah. And so I did want to get to a couple more questions because I do have a few more notes here. So Leslie was wondering, whatever the legality is, people are out there with these products that they have purchased either when they were on the shelves or now while they're still on the shelves. And so if they're to get arrested, what is the judge's kind of typical point of view? I know it's Texas, so let's maybe say, what would an urban judge say versus a rural judge? Because those are going to be different.
Well, I had occasion to went to a wine dinner the other night in West Texas, and there was a local public defender sitting at my table who by the end of the dinner was complaining to me that he was defending people who were getting arrested at the checkpoint with D8 and other such products that are not your typical marijuana. And much to his frustration as a lawyer, when he pushes back on the government, they drop the case. Even in that rural, famous for busting Snoop Dogg and Willie Nelson area. And he wanted one to go up because he thought he could beat it on appeal and get the legal ruling from the courts. But, it's better for those individual clients that he gets the government to drop it because so they can go on their way and may not be the test case with their liberty at stake.
Yeah.
So, I always hesitate to ever give mass legal advice. But if arrested with any cannabis product, the last thing I would do was, as the Pot brothers-in-law say, if y'all see the videos, shut the fuck up. Don't say anything. And if you haven't seen them, Google them, we'll watch them. They're hilarious. And make the government prove it. We, as I started saying during the session, we're spending $1 billion putting DPS on the border in the state. And the state can't come up to $5 or $10 million for their forensic crime labs. And that's not just about cannabis, that's about sexual assault and all kinds of other crimes. It's part of just the overall dysfunction of Texas as a state right now.
Yeah. Side note that you made me think about, Susan, is that win that we had recently is that in Austin, EMTs, first responders, firefighters, police department, they had a pre-screening question that asked them, had they used cannabis, legal or illegal, within the last 3 years? And if they answer that yes, because they're a patient or because they live in a legal state or whatever, they were disqualified from being able to be employed. And so we put forth a petition, and we worked with some people on city council, and that has now been pulled from part of the employment questionnaire, which I think is really important. A lot of our first responders suffer from or live with PTSD, and that is a qualifying condition in Texas. So it's important that that not be held against them, let alone if they're a patient in some other state. So I just wanted to toot a little horn on our Austin area people real quick. I wanted to, so a couple questions have been asked about THC. Is it 0 or O? I mean, I guess I don't know the right term for it. And then HHC, and they were wondering, you know, should I keep it on myself? Should I pull it? Is it totally legal? And I think that kind of wraps back around to the analog conversation. And I know these people should probably have an excellent lawyer who knows the law really well to advise them, if anything, to give them cover.
And who's reading the Controlled Substances Act with a chemist by their side. It's an incredibly complex and difficult act to read. I will readily admit I could have never made sense of it in lessons. So I got a lesson at the beginning of session from a Senate staffer who was a specialist in it. And he walked me through it and gave me a lesson. It's hard to read. Now let's think about that. Who enforces the Controlled Substance Act? A bunch of cops, sheriff's deputies, DPS, maybe a city cop. Like, they can make heads or sense of it and really know it. They're going to follow what they're told and what they've heard and what their local DA tells them they're going to prosecute. So there is no clear, is it legal or is it not answer for any of this. And if you're going to do business in the area, as I said earlier, be careful. And you've got a cost benefit analysis to go through. It
harkens back to, pre-Farm Bill 2018 here in Texas. Everyone's CBD is legal, CBD is legal. And, I'm like, I sure wish it was. Tell that grandma that just got arrested for the CBD that she bought, And so it's one of those things where it might be legal or be illegal, but that doesn't mean that you might not get in trouble until we get this prohibition debacle worked out a little bit better.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. I think that that might be all the questions that I've seen. Let's see. Is there one more in here? Oh, that's about HHC. Okay, from Sam. Got it. Well, is there anything else before we close out tonight that y'all would like to share? I know we have a lot of business owners, a lot of patients, a lot of advocates watching today. And so there's a lot of different takes on this conversation. I really appreciate all of y'all being here to, share those with us. So if y'all have anything to share, I'd like to turn it over real quick before we say goodbye. Susan, you're unmuted. You go first, and then how about Andrea, and then Christine, and then Lukas? You can close us out.
Well, I see there's a comment about DFW, Austin, Houston's not arresting, and I had occasion to chat with one of the urban district attorneys recently, and asked the DA, now that you're not prosecuting low-level marijuana possession, how does it feel? What does your world look like? And the answer was how many more resources they had to go after crimes that actually hurt people. So the more we push that larger political narrative and the more we get out and talk to people who are in law enforcement as an industry, the better, because this is all about ultimately public opinion. And how does it feel within, say, the Republican primary, if you're a prohibitionist or not?
Yep, primaries are coming up in March, y'all. Yep. Thank you, Susan. All right, Andrea.
I just want to say, I want to piggyback on that. I think the DEA is probably happy to have a lot of this off of their hands as well. And they can focus on things more like fentanyl and violent cartels and things where people are dying. And so I think the removal of hemp from the Controlled Substance Act has been a relief for them as well. Thanks for having me on the show. It was good to see everybody, and I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you for joining us. Awesome. And Christine, all the way from Utah, let us know what your final thoughts are.
I hope Texas gets the access they really deserve. You guys have been fighting a long time, and you have gone through the ringer with your legislators. So I hope you guys do truly get full plant access. You guys need it. I hope you guys figure out something. I love the fact that you guys have good labeling. Maybe Utah needs to call your people and talk to our people, because that
I'll
would be
send you the
fantastic.
regs, girl.
Yeah, no, I really do wish you guys the best of luck. I hope we can clean up our mess here.
Yeah, and thank you for reminding us that we have to always keep patients in mind when we're making decisions. So thank you for
And
that.
get your scientists involved. You might get a little further if you bring some docs in too.
Yeah, typically we save that for the more medical-based conversations over. This one is a
Sure.
little bit more legal-based, but no, you're right. The doctors, they pull a lot of weight here.
They do.
All
They're
right.
good allies.
Thank you for joining us, Christine. And Lucas, your final thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to tell everybody thank you for all the support that we've been getting from veterans, from patients that use our products, from everybody in Texas. Thank you guys for the overwhelming support. Thank you for having us on. This court case has sort of nationwide implications and has the potential to set a precedent on sort of what happens going forward in many other states. So it's very important that we hold this fight. Christine, I totally sympathize with what you guys are going through. And I wish you the best. And if there's anything we can do to help you with that, I'm more than happy. Unfortunately, I think in any industry, there's going to be people that do stupid things. And one of the things we're looking at in Texas and looking at being proactive in is Texas actually doesn't have a law right now restricting minors' access to these products. And I think that was an oversight by the state. We didn't do that. The state did that. And that's something that I think we would like to fix. And I also think that, in terms of doing full panel testing like we do, I don't know of any other company that does that outside of the medicinal and recreational Delta-8 industry. I don't know of any other hemp company that does that. So, requiring that on labels in addition to good labeling, I think is very, very important and something that should be standardized across the US. So next legislative session, there's some stuff we're looking at to help improve this industry from the inside and not wait for the state to do it. And I think we've got some challenges ahead of us, but I think we're on the right start. And, Christine, I'd love to stay in touch and get some feedback from you and make sure we're doing this the right way and serving the patients, just like you guys said.
I'd love to. Thank you.
Awesome. I love it. I think that all of us we just love the plant, and we want people to be able to be healthy and happy and not in jail, and hopefully everybody making a little bit of money. I mean, what's wrong with that if we can all be a little bit happy, right? So just to close out, I'm going to say thank you for joining us. This is a great reminder that prohibition doesn't work, but research, regulation, and good common sense does. It's always best that we self-regulate ourselves in advance of the government cracking down on us too hard. So we need to make sure that we are setting the standards here in Texas so that we can continue to have businesses that are thriving instead of worrying about the products that are on their shelves and if they can continue to sell them or they're going to eat a big loss. And if patients are concerned about if they're going to consume them and feel relief or perhaps feel nausea. So I think these are important conversations, and I'm really thankful for everybody that joined us tonight. So on that note, I will bid you all adieu. Thanks, guys.